Alright, so I will be discussing today the most recent Marvel show called MoonKnight, starring Oscar Isaac as Moon Knight. I have a feeling that Marvel has been wanting to introduce Moon Knight for so long, and I'm glad they casted Oscar Isaac because he fits this role perfectly. I wanted to do this review right after I finished the episode, but I was busy and had to do other things, so let's get into this, shall we? The first episode starts off with the main villain of our story, named Arthur Harrow, putting smashed glass into his shoes, and it was a very weird scene to watch. Then we get introduced to Stephen Grant, who works at a museum in England, more specifically the gift shop, which he explains multiple times in the first episode. Personally, the first episode is the best first episode of any other Marvel show I've watched, because all the other shows don't start getting good until the third or fourth episode. This one had me hooked from the get-go. After Steven gets bossed around by his boss, he then goes to see his only friend it seems he has, which is a man in gold pretending to be a statue, and that never says a word to him. So we can easily see that Steven isn't quite right in the head, and is somewhat of an introvert and is very lonely. He then magically wakes up with a broken jaw and runs away from these men that are shooting at him. He luckily blends in with a nearby crowd in a village and witnesses an old lady getting murdered right there in public by the guy who is our main villain with wavy hair who everyone else bows down to. The main purpose that he has is to judge people whether they are, quote, evil or are pure, and his tattoo of a scale decides this apparently. Steven then hijacks a nearby cupcake truck and drives away and is getting chased by these people from the village. Steven keeps blacking out and waking up to him supposedly killing the men chasing him and not aware at all of what is actually happening. He then wakes up again after a blackout but is at home now and unharmed and notices that his pet goldfish, who has a missing fin, now has its fin back. He goes to the pet store place only for the worker saying that he went there not too long ago to get a fish. So we can easily see now that when he blacks out, he does do things that he's totally not sure of until he wakes up and finds out for himself. He then remembers that he has a date that night at a steak place he picked, even though he's a vegan and has no recollection of ever wanting to go on a date or to a non-vegan place. His date never shows up and asks why she hasn't come by calling her, and his date says that it was 2 days ago and that they are supposedly supposed to meet on Friday, but then he finds out from his waiter that it's actually Sunday. So Steven is clearly losing his sanity and has no idea what the days are anymore or some of the actions that he has done, so we clearly know that he isn't in control and that something else must be. Steven then goes home and sees something strange on the floor and notices a board in his wall broke. He opens it up and sees a phone in there, and when he opens it, he sees that there are missed calls from someone named Layla. He calls her and she asks if he is okay and refers to him as Mark and asks why he's talking weird because she is American. He hears a voice in his head that then draws away his attention from the phone, and he goes looking around for it but can't seem to find it. And out of fear, he runs out of the room and into the hall and goes into an elevator. He arrives on a floor and sees a giant scary creature approaching him, but when it finally gets there, it's just an old lady. So whatever is happening to him, he is seeing visions of a weird creature and hears a voice coming from inside his head, so something is definitely wrong with him. He then wakes up on a bus that drops him off at the museum where he is confronted by that guy that murdered the old lady. So now he definitely knows that it isn't a dream anymore, but it's actually real. The man puts a cane around Steven's arms and has it moving back and forth like a pendulum to judge him on whether he is evil or pure. The tattoo on his arm can't decide, so he just lets Steven leave. Later that night, Steven hears over the speaker Arthur Harrow, our villain, asking him for the beetle that he had with him back in the village. He then gets chased by a giant dog-like creature that he eventually gets away from in the bathroom, but is finally confronted by the man in his head from earlier in the mirror. He tells Steven that he needs to give up control over his body so that he can save them both from the creature that is trying to kill them. After hesitation and confusion, Steven finally lets himself go, and the man in the mirror named Mark turns himself into the costume hero named as MoonKnight. And right then, the creature breaks through, but it's already too late for the monster, and Moon Knight is beating the crap out of him, and then the episode ends. Okay, that was a lot to take in. So obviously the bad guy in the show is named Arthur Harrow, and he really needs that beetle from Steven, and even sends some weird monster after him to get it, and we finally get to see Moon Knight transform. Okay, so after that, we now go on to our second episode. Steven is off again, back to the museum, and it seems to be shut down due to a section of the museum being torn up, which we now know is from Steven and the creature that night. The security guy goes over footage of what happened in the museum, and it shows Steven, but there isn't a monster chasing him. Steven can't believe it and is now confused on whether again the weird things happening to him are real or in his head. He then afterward meets up with a man that tells him he needs to seek mental attention and then proceeds to fire him. He finds a key in his pocket with a logo attached to it, and it turns out that there is a storage place and that he is already registered in the storage unit, but not under the name Steven, but under the name Mark. So this Mark guy seems to be in control of Steven whenever Steven blacks out or goes to sleep or whatever. And that maybe the explanation to why Steven says he has a sleeping disorder and the reason he tries to stay awake at night and attaches an ankle rope thing to him and has sand all around the bottom of his bed. So anyways, he opens up the storage unit and finds a duffel bag that has guns in it and a fake passport under the name of Mark Spector. And the beetle he had earlier is also in there now. So obviously this guy Mark is doing something whenever Steven isn't in control. A reflection of Steven appears, but it's not him, and it's actually Mark. And Steven gets angry, so he threatens to bring the duffel bag to the authorities. He runs out of the storage unit and turns around to flashing lights, and the same creature from the hall with the elevator is coming after him now. So Steven runs out of the building and meets up with a woman on a bike named Layla, who he just found by falling on the ground. She gets really angry at Steven and yells at him for speaking funny and not trying to reach out to her earlier. Steven has no idea what she's talking about and ends up taking her back to his place. Not long after, the authorities arrive and barge in his room and look through his duffel bag and say that he's a fraud and a thief and see the fake ID that he has under the name Mark Spector and take him in. They don't arrive to the police station though, but some weird sketchy place where Steven sees that the people there have the same tattoo of what that guy Arthur had on their arm. Arthur opens the car door and uncuffs Steven, saying that the people he's with are actually there to do good, and then he knows about the voices in his head and how Conchu, who was the creature that he saw that day in the storage place, is bad news. Arthur then reveals to Steven that before him he was Conchu's avatar, meaning the person he took over and used. Layla then intervenes with Arthur and Steven and gives Steven the beetle. Out of anger, Arthur summons the dog, like monster thing again, with his staff that glows purple, and has it chasing them. Steven is having trouble surrendering his body to Mark and tries to fight the beast himself. He can't seem to be doing too good of a job and finally summons Mark, who finally kills the monster. Steven can now see Mark but from the mirror point of view and gets angry with Mark because Mark doesn't want to surrender Steven's body. Mark is mad at Conchu, who he is now talking to because Conchu's next avatar is the woman Layla. The episode ends with Mark now in Egypt and Steven still trapped in a mirror. Now that my summary is complete, I first have to say that the whole two-personality thing was such a good thing to do for a Marvel character, and the design of MoonKnight looks amazing. My rating out of 10 for the episode is an 8. There isn't a lot of MoonKnight, but the struggle Steven goes through and the job at the museum and Arthur being introduced made me instantly love this show. The second episode wasn't as good to me personally, but showed a lot more MoonKnight and wasn't boring at all in any parts. So I rate that a 7. And so far this show I would rate as a whole would be an 8. This easily could be my favorite Marvel show, so I can't wait to see what happens in the next couple episodes. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe and like, and goodbye.